Mark chapter 14. Let's turn to verse 66. Mark chapter 14, starting at verse 66. And as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came. And seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, "You were with Jesus the Nazarene." But he denied it, saying, "I neither know nor understand what you're talking about." And he went out onto the porch. And the servant girl saw him and began once more to say to the bystanders, This is one of them." But again he denied it. And after a little while, the bystanders were again saying to Peter, "Surely you're one of them, for you're a Galilean too." But he began to curse and swear, "I do not know this man you're talking about." Immediately, a rooster crowed a second time. And Peter remembered how Jesus made the remark to him, "Before a rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he began to weep. "I've got your back." That's a statement we've heard before. And it just means I'm watching out for you. I'm here for you. And I'll be there for you to protect you from whatever might happen. I won't let you down, or I won't abandon you. That's the idea behind "I've got your back." Well, Jesus had told all the disciples that they would fall away. But Peter, in Mark chapter 14, verse 29 and verse 31, says, "Even if they all fall away, yet I will not." And then again, "Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you." I've got your back. That's what Peter's saying. Now, between the time Jesus said that and our story today, Jesus has been arrested in the garden. All the disciples scattered, just like Jesus said. The soldiers are carrying Jesus to the high priest, and we find someone following at a distance. That someone was Peter. And he went right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the officers, warming himself by the fire. Inside the palace, Jesus was on trial. First, he was taken to Annas. As we discussed it in our Sunday school class, Annas was the Jewish high priest recognized by the Jews for life, but the Romans didn't allow that to happen. But Annas' responsibility was to investigate or to examine all sacrifices. And so Jesus appears in front of Annas first. Then he goes to Caiaphas. Caiaphas is the high priest that's recognized by the Romans. And that's why your Bible will say he was the high priest that year. Because the Romans changed the high priest often to kind of control the power that that high priest might hold. But they come together, and if you read the verses prior, they're coming together to find a reason to accuse Jesus. See, this trial is very illegal. They don't have a charge. They arrest him in the middle of the night and try him in the middle of the night. That's illegal. The witnesses can't agree on anything. This just was a whole mockery of a trial. All right? But while Jesus is inside the palace on trial, Peter is on the outside of the palace on trial. Maybe we don't think about it that way very often, but I want us to think that it's out here that Peter is on trial. Will he take his stand for Jesus or not? Okay, so let's go into that courtyard and let's examine what's happening and what is it that we can learn from this event. First of all, we need to understand Peter denies Jesus. See, when he gets in there, he goes by the fire. He's seated by the fire, warming himself. So can you kind of imagine in your mind a cool night? And he's sitting there by the fire, and as the fire is there, the servant girl caught the right glance with the light of the fire in Peter's face. And she said, "Hey, you're one of them. You're one of Jesus' disciples." And Peter answers, "I neither know nor understand what you're talking about." Now, first of all, we don't know what the girl meant by "you're one of the disciples." She just recognized it. Did she mean him harm, or is it just she just recognized it? We don't know. She may have been surprised that he was even there, because everybody in that courtyard knew what was going on inside the palace. And so he said, "I don't know or understand what you're talking about." Really? Really, Peter? I mean, come on. That's the lamest excuse he could have come up with. I don't know what you're talking about. He's trying to evade the question, that's obvious. But to say, "I don't even know what you're talking about," why is he in his courtyard? Everybody in the courtyard knows what's happening on the second floor. You can see it from the courtyard. They know what's going on. So why is Peter there if he doesn't know anything about what's happening? So Peter removed himself from the fire and he went out on the porch. Okay? So here he is outside in the cool. Well, he must have got a little too cool and decided to go sit back down by the fire. And when he comes back in, this girl saying to the people around her, "He's one of them. He is one of them." And Peter said, "No, I'm not. I don't know what you're talking about." That was the second time. Then the third time. Peter's been sitting by the fire now probably for several hours. You don't just sit by the fire and not talk to people. And so here he is, he's talking to the people around him. And somebody says, "Hey, you're Galilean." And they knew that by his speech, because of his accent. His accent, maybe some of the words he used were a little peculiar in Judea, in Jerusalem. They said, "We know you're one of them." And then to top it off, John adds this. Mark doesn't tell us this, but John adds this. Somebody related to Malchus, who got his ear cut off, said, "Didn't I see you out in the garden?" He recognized that Peter was the one that cut off Malchus's ear. There's no way Peter can deny that he knows Jesus. But Peter began to curse and to swear, "I do not know this man of whom you speak." Now let's talk about that word curse for a minute. This word doesn't mean what we mean when we say curse. We think about all the foul language somebody's got to say when they curse. This word doesn't mean that. So don't get the picture of a whole lot of foul language coming out of Peter's mouth. The word itself means to declare or vow under the penalty of execution. It means to bind with an oath. And so Peter is, what he's doing is he's calling a curse down on himself if he's lying. Okay, that's what the word curse means. Now, let's think about the word swear. And the word swear means again, to take an oath, like you would in court. You know, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. That's what Peter is doing in this word, swear. So it's not all this foul language like we use those words for today, but it may be even worse. Because he's calling down on himself a curse, and he's swearing he's telling the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and the whole time he's saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know this man. Which was a complete lie. So if God had given him what he asked for, Peter would have made it out of that courtyard. But just as Peter is making that oath, I'm telling the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, the rooster crowed for the second time. And Peter remembered the words of Jesus, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. You will deny me 3 times. Peter remembered those words, and the scripture says Peter began to weep. Now, that word doesn't even begin to describe what it means. You know, when I think of weep, you know, we have a little bit of cry. I mean, a little tear comes out of your eyes. That's not what the word means. The word means to sob, to wail out loud. Peter burst out into tears. Well, that would be a better translation than weep. Peter burst out into tears because he realized what he had done, and to make it even worse, his eye caught Jesus' eye, and he knew Jesus is saying, I told you, Peter. I told you, Peter. You should have been ready. Now, how did Peter, the one who confessed, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, get himself into such a predicament? How is it that the one who said, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you, just denied him not once, not twice, but 3 times? How is that? And more importantly, what can we learn from that? So let's think about that. Why? And what are we going to learn? Why did Peter do it, and what are we going to learn? First of all, let's think about pride. You know, Peter boasted. Even if they all fall away, not me. Not me. I won't do it. And even if I have to die with you, I'll never deny you. Well, wait a minute. He's right there in that place where he could die with Jesus. And what did he do? Denied him. So, Peter took the first step in falling away by being so boastful, prideful. Because remember what the book of Proverbs says, Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling. Folks, we all need to be careful about boasting and pride, because we can become overconfident in our service to God. 1 Corinthians 10:12, therefore let the one who thinks he stands watch out that he does not fall. Peter, one of the trusted three, the one Jesus gave the keys to the kingdom to, denied he ever knew the Savior. Part of that's because of his pride. So what did Peter learn that we need to learn from that situation? Humility. Humility. Look at Peter over in 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5 and 6. What he's going to say. You younger men likewise be subject to your elders, and all of you clothe yourselves with humility towards one another, because God is opposed to the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, so that he may exalt you at the proper time. Peter learned that lesson in humility. Don't go around boasting about who you are, what you've got, how great you've served the Lord. Don't boast about anything, but be humble. And wait. And at the proper time, God will exalt you. You don't have to exalt yourself. Wait for God to do it. God will exalt you. And so Peter learned this lesson in humility. So pride was one reason. Another reason that Peter failed his trial is a lack of preparation. Let's think back into last week's lesson in our quest books. And we find Jesus has taken the disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he told the 8 of them to stay there at the gate, and he took with him Peter, James, and John, and he said, you sit here and keep watch while I go over there and pray. Now, when he told them to keep watch, he was telling them to pray. We know the story. We know what happens, all right? Because Jesus comes back and he finds them sleeping. After his first hour of prayer, he finds them sleeping. Okay? And so he says, what? Can't you even watch for 1 hour? He goes back to pray another time, and he comes back and he finds them sleeping. And this is what he said, and he called out Peter in particular, and he said, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch for 1 hour? Keep watching and praying so that you will not come into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. But what he said, keep watching and praying so that you will not come into temptation. We fast forward to the trials. And when you look at Jesus' trial and you look at Peter's trial, Jesus in his trial, Jesus in complete control. Nothing happened that Jesus didn't allow to happen in his trial. He's in total control. Peter, on the other hand, is out of control. What's the difference between the two? Jesus spent at least 3 hours that night in prayer, because each time he come back, couldn't you watch 1 hour? Couldn't you watch 1 hour? Couldn't you watch 1 hour? 3 hours Jesus prayed. 3 hours Peter slept. Peter wasn't prepared for what he was about to face. Jesus was in control because he went to the Father in prayer. He found the strength he needed by going to the Father in prayer. Peter didn't have that strength because he went to sleep. You know, I know we all need sleep. God designed us to sleep. We all need it. But sometimes we need to pray and not be sleeping. And this was a time Peter needed to pray. Jesus warned him, Peter, pray that you don't fall into temptation. But Peter finds himself in the courtyard denying who Jesus is. He should have been praying when he was sleeping. We all need to be aware that we can fall away. Hebrews 2:1 says, for this reason we must pay much closer attention to what we've heard so that we do not drift away from it. Think about all the things Peter had heard. For 3 years now, Peter has heard Jesus teach. He has heard Jesus declare that He is the Son of God. Peter witnessed things that the other disciples didn't all necessarily get to experience. I mean, Peter's walking out on the water with Jesus. And don't forget, he did walk before he doubted and sank. The others didn't experience that. Peter saw Jesus raise Jairus' daughter. James and John saw that, but the rest of them didn't. Peter on the Mount of Transfiguration saw Moses and Elijah. Again, James and John saw that, the rest of them didn't. Peter, this great man, denies Jesus because he wasn't prepared. He wasn't prepared. So what did Peter learn from this experience? Diligence. 1 Peter 5:8 says, be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Yeah, he was definitely seeking after Peter that night. And he made Peter feel so foolish. 2 Peter 3:14 says, therefore, beloved, since you look for these things, be diligent to be found spotless and blameless by Him at peace. Think about this. We look forward to these things. That's what Peter is talking about. He's talking about heaven. He's talking about what God's got in store for us in eternity. And we look forward to that. We all want to go to heaven, right? If I ask that, who wants to go to heaven? Everybody can raise your hand. Everybody wants to go, right? Just not right now, right? You're not going to catch a bus now, but you want to go. And that's the thing. We all want to go. But if we want to go to heaven, it requires a little bit of diligence. We need to spend some time in the Word. We need to spend some time in praying. We need to understand what it is Jesus wants us to be. He wants us to be blameless. He wants us to be spotless. And He wants us to be at peace in Him. Peter learned that by the campfire in the courtyard. But there's another thing that caused Peter to make his failure, and that is fear. Fear. Mark 14:15 tells us that Peter followed at a distance. He didn't go right behind the soldiers as they were taking Jesus. He followed at a distance. He didn't want anybody else to know He was coming. And so he's sneaking around. I kind of like that picture there. He looks like he's sneaking around trying to figure his way how he's going to get in that courtyard. All right, but he found his way in the courtyard. But he followed at a distance because he's afraid. What's he afraid of? The hostility that might happen if they found out his relationship to Jesus. That's why when they said, "You're one of them," I don't know what you're talking about. He's afraid to admit that he was one of them. Because he's afraid he's going to go to the cross with Jesus if he admits it. And he's not ready to go. He's afraid. Are we afraid to take a stand for Jesus? Yeah, this is not an easy world that we live in. And all you gotta do is turn on the TV and somebody's shooting somebody for no reason at all. Right? And to admit that you're a Christian, that'd give them a reason. I mean, churches have been attacked. And we're going to see more and more of it, I'm afraid, if the Lord tarries. And so, are we afraid when we go outside to take our stand for Jesus? And here it's easy. You know, we're all Christians. It's okay. We can admit that. What about outside? What about in the courtyard of life? Peter forgot what Jesus taught in Mark chapter 8, verses 35 through 38. Jesus said, "For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it benefit a person to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what could a person give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." Whoever denies me, I will deny him when I come back. Now think about that, folks. Denying Jesus. If you look carefully at the words, it's sort of like it was pointed out in the Sunday school class this morning. He didn't actually say no. He said, "I don't know what you're talking about." Well, them half-truths are easy to tell, right? Because it doesn't sound like we're lying, but a half-truth is still a lie. That started out in the Garden of Eden. Okay? So a half-truth is still a lie. Don't even try to go there. It is. And so we've got to learn, we either going to admit we're Christians or we're not. And when you don't tell people you are a Christian, do they know? Do they know by your actions? Can they tell by your words? You see, we don't have to live like the world. In fact, that could have been another problem I could have added, and I didn't this morning, but I could have added Peter was trying to fit in with the crowd around the fire. We don't want to fit in with the crowd in the world. We're Christians. Jesus called us out of the world. He called us to be lights in this world. So we don't want to fit in. We want to acknowledge Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And we want the whole world to know that. Or at least we should, because if we don't want the whole world to know that, Jesus said, if you're ashamed of me when I come back, don't talk to me about it then, because I don't know you. So what did Peter learn? Peter learned not to be afraid, but to glorify God. 1 Peter 4:16, but if anyone suffers as a Christian, he is not to be ashamed, but is to glorify God in his name. Not be ashamed, but glorify God. So, if somebody wants to ridicule you, mock you, make fun of you because you're a Christian, give God the glory. That you've been counted worthy to suffer with Christ. So the question we have to ask ourselves, are we knowing and claiming Jesus no matter what, or only when it's acceptable to do so? It's very acceptable to do so right here in this room. What about when you go to work? Your co-workers know you're a Christian? What about with our families? Do our families know we're Christians? What about our neighbors? Do they know we're Christians? Are we hiding Jesus for fear of the repercussions that might follow? Or do we only claim Jesus when it's socially advantageous for us to do so? We have to understand there's no such thing as a hidden disciple. No such thing as a hidden disciple. Jesus said in Matthew 6:15, your light must shine before people in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. You can't be a hidden disciple. So who do we want to know about Jesus? You see, Peter, what he did was a massive failure. He could have taught the whole courtyard about Jesus. And he didn't. This week, Carla was approached by a man that asked her if she knew Jesus. And she said, yes, of course. The man happened to be 90-something years old. He said, I know I don't have many days left, so I want to ask everybody I come in contact, do you know Jesus? Well, guess what? None of us know how many days we got left. So that ought to be on our minds. We ought to think about it. We need to see people and say, do you know Jesus? You know, is Jesus Lord in your life? We have to stop being afraid of society and stand up for Christ, because our society has gotten in this mess because Christians haven't been standing up. So we got to take our stand. We cannot deny Jesus, and we must remember the words of Jesus in Matthew 10:32 and 33. Therefore, everyone who confesses me before people, I will confess him before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before people, I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. We can't afford to deny Jesus. Because if we do, heaven's not where we're going. And we don't want to go to the other place. We just don't. We don't want him to deny us, so we can't deny him. We have to take our stand for him. So think about it right now. Who are you going to tell about Jesus today? Don't wait till tomorrow. Who are you going to tell about Jesus today? Confess Christ before everybody. Don't be ashamed if you belong to Jesus Christ. It may not be easy, but you will be blessed. And at the right time, God will exalt you to a place far higher than anything this world can offer. So, if you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, now could be your opportunity to make that first confession before people, and then continue to make that confession before others. So,
they're just going to sing from their seats.
They're going to sing it from their seats?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's sing.